There is a white powder on your phlox. It showed up overnight. The leaves look like someone dusted them with flour and you panicked. You grabbed the first fungicide spray you could find. You coated every leaf, top and bottom, and tomorrow morning it is going to look worse. Not because the disease spread overnight, because the spray you just used made the conditions that caused it even more perfect for the fungus to thrive. 70% of gardeners who spray powdery mildew make it worse on the first attempt. Not because the product is bad, because they spray at the wrong time of day, on the wrong part of the plant, and they skip the one thing that actually stops it, the thing that costs nothing, the thing that takes 2 minutes. And you can do it with a pair of pruners you already own. Here is what powdery mildew actually is, why it keeps coming back year after year, despite everything you throw at it, and the 3 fixes that work versus the 3 things everyone does that guarantee it spreads. There is also a treatment that sounds completely absurd, involves something from your refrigerator, and is backed by peer-reviewed research from 2 universities. I will get to that one. I have been growing perennials for over 30 years. I have dealt with powdery mildew on phlox, bee balm, roses, lilac, ninebark, and squash. For the first decade of that, I handled it wrong. I sprayed in the evening because that was when I had time. I stopped watering because I assumed moisture was the problem. I watched it get worse every single July and blamed the climate. My neighbour finally asked me one fall why her phlox looked clean and mine looked like a flower explosion. Same street, same humidity, same summer. Her phlox was a variety called David, planted with generous spacing between the stems. Mine was an old variety crammed into a tight border with no airflow. That conversation changed how I think about this disease entirely, and everything I'm about to tell you is what the last 20 years of growing susceptible plants in humid summers has taught me. If you find this useful, I would appreciate it if you pass it along to someone who is standing in their garden right now, staring at white leaves and reaching for a spray bottle. That person needs to hear this before they make it worse. Let me start with what powdery mildew actually is, because almost everything most gardeners assume about it is inverted. Powdery mildew is not one disease. It is dozens of different fungal species, all from the order Erysiphales, and they all look the same. A white or grey powdery coating on leaves, stems, and flower buds. The mildew on your phlox is a different species than the mildew on your squash. The one on your roses is different from the one on your lilac. They do not cross-infect. Your rose mildew did not jump to your phlox. They are separate organisms that happen to wear the same costume. Here is where your instincts betray you. Unlike nearly every other fungal disease you have encountered in the garden, powdery mildew thrives in dry conditions with high humidity. Dry conditions, high humidity. Those sound contradictory, but they are not. The fungus needs humid air around the plant, but it does not need wet leaves. In fact, direct water on the leaves can actually wash spores off and inhibit growth. This is the opposite of black spot on roses, the opposite of botrytis on peonies, the opposite of every other fungal disease where the advice is to keep the foliage dry. So what happens? You see a fungus on your plant. Every piece of gardening advice you have ever absorbed tells you that fungus equals moisture. You stop watering. The plant gets stressed from drought. Stressed plants have weakened defenses. The mildew gets worse. You see the mildew getting worse and you water even less. The cycle accelerates. You did exactly what logic told you to do, and the fungus rewarded your logic by thriving. The actual trigger is warm days in the upper 70s or 80s, cool nights dropping into the 60s, poor air circulation, and crowded plantings. That combination creates a pocket of humid, stagnant air around the foliage where the fungal spores germinate and spread, all while the leaf surface stays dry enough for the mycelium to colonize. This is the exact condition in every suburban perennial border in July. Plants jammed shoulder to shoulder because we all plant too close together and not a breath of wind moving through the interior of the border. Your garden is a mildew incubator by design. Now that you understand why this fungus breaks every rule you know about plant disease, here are the 3 fixes that actually work. The first one is free, takes 2 minutes, and in my garden eliminated mildew entirely on phlox that had been infected every single year for over a decade. But first, the plants it hits hardest, and I want to name them specifically because you are probably growing at least three of these right now. Phlox is the poster child for powdery mildew. Garden phlox, Phlox paniculata, grows 3 to 4 feet tall, blooms in shades of pink, purple, white, and magenta from July through September in zones 3 through 8 and is one of the most beautiful midsummer perennials you can grow. It is also a mildew magnet in humid climates. Bee balm monarda, with its wild, spiky red and purple flowers on 3-foot stems from June through August, zones 3 through 9, is nearly as susceptible. Roses, particularly hybrid teas and older shrub varieties. Lilac, especially the common lilac that blooms those fragrant purple clusters in May. Zones 3 through 7. 9 bark, which produces clusters of white or pink flowers in late spring on arching branches. Zones 2 through 8. Peony foliage after bloom is finished. Squash and cucumber vines in the vegetable garden. Zinnias, which grow 1 to 3 feet tall and produce bright, vivid blooms in every color from midsummer through frost in zones 2 through 11. And crepe myrtle, those beautiful summer flowering trees with crepe-textured blooms in pink, red, white, and purple from June through September in zones 6 through 9. If you grow any of these, you will see powdery mildew at some point. The question is whether your conditions make it mild and cosmetic or severe enough to ruin the entire display. The disease rarely kills a plant outright. What it does is weaken it. Reduced photosynthesis means smaller blooms, stunted new growth, distorted leaves, and a garden from July through September that makes you want to cut everything to the ground and start over. I have had Julys where my phlox looked so bad I was embarrassed when people walked past the front border. Not because the plant was dying, because it looked diseased, and a diseased-looking garden feels like a personal failure, even when you know the plant will survive. So here are the 3 things that actually work. Fix number 1. Thin your plants for airflow. This is the fix that costs nothing, takes 2 minutes with a pair of pruners, and prevents more mildew than every fungicide on the shelf at your garden center combined. Powdery mildew needs still, humid air trapped between dense stems and leaves. That is its environment. Remove that environment, and you remove the disease. For phlox specifically, here is what to do. In late May or early June, before mildew appears, before the plants are even thinking about budding, go to each clump and remove every 3rd stem entirely at ground level. Cut it right at the soil. Do not trim the top. Do not shorten it. Remove the entire stem. If your phlox clump has 15 stems, cut 5 of them out. The remaining 10 stems now have space between them. Air moves through the center of the plant. Humidity drops. Sunlight reaches the interior leaves. The mildew spores that land on those leaves cannot germinate because the microclimate they need, that still humid pocket, no longer exists. My phlox had mildew every single year. Every July, like clockwork, the lower leaves would turn white and the infection would creep upward until the whole plant looked dusted. I sprayed neem oil, I sprayed sulfur fungicide, I tried everything short of replacing the plants. The year I removed 1/3 of the stems, no mildew, none. Same variety, same spot in the garden, same soil, same summer, same humidity. The only difference was air movement through the interior of the plant. I have thinned my phlox every June since then. Mildew has not returned. And here is the thing. This principle applies to every susceptible plant, not just phlox. Bee balm, thin it the same way. Lilac, open up the interior by removing crossing branches and suckers so air flows through the canopy. Roses, prune for an open vase shape, not a dense globe. 9 bark, remove interior deadwood so the center of the shrub breathes. Every plant that gets mildew benefits from the same architectural change. Open the structure, let air move. The fungus cannot colonize a well-ventilated plant. That single fix, thinning, is worth more than everything else I to tell you. If you do nothing else after watching this, thin your susceptible plants in early June. But the next 2 fixes stack on top of thinning, and together they make mildew a non-issue in most gardens. Fix number 2. Baking soda spray as a preventive treatment. 1 tablespoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of liquid dish soap as a surfactant so the spray sticks to the leaf surface. 1 gallon of water. Mix it up and spray on susceptible plants every 7 to 10 days before mildew appears. This changes the surface pH of the leaves to a level the fungal spores cannot colonize. It makes the leaf surface inhospitable to germination. The critical word is before. Baking soda spray prevents mildew from establishing a foothold. It does not cure an existing infection. If you wait until you see white powder on the leaves and then reach for the baking soda, you are too late for those leaves. The mycelium has already penetrated the leaf tissue. The baking soda cannot reach it. Start spraying in late June, when nighttime temperatures begin dropping below 70 degrees and daytime humidity rises. Continue every 7 to 10 days through August. This is a calendar commitment, not a reaction to symptoms. Mark it on your phone. Set a reminder. The spray only works if you maintain the schedule before the fungus arrives. I use baking soda spray on my zinnias and my squash starting the last week of June. Both crops are mildew-prone in my Zone 6 garden, and both stay clean through August, as long as I keep up the schedule. The year I got lazy and skipped 2 weeks in mid-July, the squash leaves were white within 10 days. Consistency is the price of prevention. Now, fix number 3. I saved this for last because it sounds completely absurd, and I need you to stay with me. Milk spray. 1 part whole milk to 9 parts water. Spray it directly on affected leaves in direct sunlight. The proteins in the milk interact with sunlight to produce free radicals that kill powdery mildew on contact. I know how that sounds. It sounds like something your grandmother would have told you, right up there with burying a penny next to your tomato plant. But this is not folklore. Studies from the University of Western Australia and research at the University of Connecticut confirm that milk spray at a 10% concentration is as effective as synthetic chemical fungicides on powdery mildew affecting squash, roses, and zinnias. Fernando Bettiol at the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation published similar findings. The milk proteins, primarily lactoferrin, when exposed to UV light, generate oxygen radicals that are directly toxic to the fungal mycelium. Here is what makes milk spray different from the baking soda approach. Milk spray works on existing infections. It is a treatment, not just a preventive. If your phlox is already covered in white powder, milk spray can knock the active infection back. Baking soda cannot do that. Spray every 5 to 7 days. The one rule, and this is non-negotiable, spray in morning sun, not evening shade. The sunlight activates the mechanism. Without UV light hitting the milk proteins on the leaf surface, nothing happens. Morning application, east-facing exposure if possible when the sun is directly on the foliage. Spray, let the sun hit it, and the chemistry does the work. A friend of mine thought I was out of my mind when I told her to spray milk on her roses. She had tried 2 different fungicides from the garden centre, and neither had controlled the mildew on her hybrid tea roses. She mixed up the milk spray, applied it on a Saturday morning in direct sun, and by the following weekend the white coating had visibly receded. She sprayed again, and by the 3rd week the new growth was coming in clean. She still calls it the milk cure and brings it up at every garden club meeting like she invented it. So that is the full toolkit, thin for airflow, the structural fix that prevents mildew before it starts. Baking soda spray before the fungus arrives. Milk spray after it appears. 3 layers of defense that stack together. But those 3 fixes will fail if you are simultaneously doing any of the 3 things I'm about to describe, and I guarantee you are doing at least one of them right now. Mistake number 1. Spraying fungicide in the evening. Most people spray their garden after work, in the evening when the temperature drops and the sun is not beating down on them. For every other garden task, that timing makes sense. The powdery mildew, it is the worst possible time. Here is the mechanism most people miss. You spray fungicide on the leaves. The fungicide may kill some active spores on contact, but the spray also adds a film of moisture to the leaf surface. That moisture sits on the leaves overnight in cool, humid conditions. Exactly the environment powdery mildew needs to germinate new spores. Every spot the spray missed, every leaf the spray did not fully cover, is now sitting in a thin film of moisture in cool night air. You created a mildew nursery on the very surfaces you were trying to protect. You fought the disease and gave it reinforcements in the same motion. Spray in the morning, when the sun is rising, when the air is warming, when the leaves will dry completely within an hour. The fungicide does its job, the leaves dry, and there is no overnight moisture to encourage new spore germination. Mistake number 2. Overhead watering in the afternoon. This seems to contradict what I told you earlier about powdery mildew not needing wet leaves, and I need you to hold both ideas at once. The mildew itself does not require wet foliage to grow, but splashing water on foliage in the afternoon creates wet leaves going into cool evening air. That transition, wet leaves cooling slowly into humid night conditions, creates the exact stagnant microclimate the fungus colonizes. The water itself does not feed the mildew. The humid environment the water creates as it slowly evaporates through the evening, that is what feeds it. Water at the base of your plants? Use a soaker hose threaded through the border or drip irrigation at soil level. Keep the water off the foliage entirely if you can. If you must use an overhead sprinkler, run it early in the morning, before 8 if possible, so the leaves dry completely by noon. A leaf that is dry by midday does not create that humid evening pocket. A leaf that is wet at 5 in the afternoon does. Look, I watered my perennial border with an overhead sprinkler for years. Every evening right after dinner. My phlox, my bee balm, my roses, all mildewed every July without fail. When I switched to a soaker hose and morning watering, the mildew severity dropped noticeably even before I started thinning the stems. It was the combination of evening moisture and dense planting that created conditions the fungus could not resist. Remove either one and the pressure drops. Remove both and the mildew often disappears entirely. Mistake number 3. Ignoring fallen leaves in autumn. This is the reason powdery mildew comes back every single year despite everything you do during the growing season, and it is the piece most gardeners completely miss. This is also where the timeline of mildew expands beyond summer into something that spans the entire year. Powdery mildew spores overwinter. They survive in a dormant structure called a chasmathecium, a tiny dark fruiting body that forms on infected leaf tissue in late summer and fall. When those infected leaves drop to the ground and sit through winter, the chasmathecia persist in the leaf litter. When spring rains come and temperatures warm, the spores release and reinfect the new growth emerging from the same plant directly above. You treated the mildew all summer, you sprayed and thinned and did everything right. The plant looked clean by September. Then in October, the leaves dropped, covered in dormant spore structures you could not see with your bare eyes. You left them on the ground, you mulched over them. And the following June, the mildew was back, as if nothing had happened, because the source was right there, in the soil, under your mulch, waiting for warmth. Rake up and bag every infected leaf in fall. Everyone. Do not compost them at home. Home compost piles rarely reach temperatures high enough to destroy the chasmathecia reliably. You need sustained temperatures above 130 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the pile, and most backyard compost does not get there consistently. Bag the leaves. Put them in the trash. Municipal yard waste programs that use industrial hot composting can handle them, but your backyard bin cannot. This one cleanup task in October, 20 minutes of raking and bagging, prevents roughly half of the following year's mildew pressure. I tested this in my own garden. I cleaned up every fallen leaf from my phlox border one October and deliberately left the fallen leaves from my bee balm patch untouched. Same garden, same conditions, same summer the following year. The phlox had noticeably less mildew the next July. The bee balm was infected by the 3rd week of June, a full month earlier. One fall cleanup, months of difference in the timing and severity of the next year's outbreak. Everything I have told you so far is treatment and prevention. Thinning, spraying, timing, cleanup. What I have not addressed yet is the gardener who does all of this, every single step, and still gets mildew every year. Because for that gardener, the problem is not technique, it is genetics. If the same plant gets powdery mildew every single year in your garden, despite thinning, despite spraying, despite perfect timing and meticulous fall cleanup, the variety you are growing is genetically susceptible and your specific climate is triggering that susceptibility every summer. You are fighting the plant's own DNA, and you do not have to. Replace it with a resistant variety of the same species. You are not giving up the plant. You are choosing the version of it that was bred to handle your conditions. For phlox, replace older mildew-prone varieties with David, which produces pure white flower clusters on 3 to 4 foot stems from July through September in zones 3 through 8 and has strong mildew resistance. Or try Jana, a slightly smaller cultivar with lavender pink flowers that butterflies swarm to, zones 4 through 8, also highly resistant. Both are Phlox paniculata, same species, same garden presence, different genetics. For bee balm, replace the old Cambridge Scarlet or other heritage varieties with Grand Marshal, which blooms deep fuchsia purple on 2 to 3 foot stems, zones 3 through 9, or Marshall's Delight, clear pink flowers, same height and zone range, both bred specifically for mildew resistance. For roses, the Knockout series and any variety marketed as disease-resistant have been bred to handle mildew and black spot in conditions that would devastate a hybrid tea. For crepe myrtle, the varieties Natchez, Muskogee and Tuscarora all carry strong mildew resistance. If you are planting a new crepe myrtle, choose one of these. If your existing crepe myrtle mildews every year and it is an older variety, the honest answer is that you are managing genetics, not disease. For nine bark, Diablo and Summer Wine, both zones 2 through 7, both produce those beautiful dark burgundy leaves and clusters of white to pink flowers in late spring, and both resist mildew far better than the straight species. Now, I want to be straightforward about something. Choosing a resistant variety does not guarantee zero mildew forever. Resistance is a spectrum, not a switch. In an unusually humid summer with stagnant air, even a resistant variety can show some mildew on the lowest leaves. But the difference between a few spotted leaves near the base and an entire plant coated white by August is the difference between a cosmetic imperfection you barely notice and a garden display that makes you want to rip everything out. The resistant variety gives you that margin. It turns mildew from a crisis into a footnote. The gardener who replaces a mildew-prone phlox with David and never sees mildew again is not a better gardener. She planted a better plant. There is no shame in that. There is sense in it. Here is what this all comes down to. Thin for airflow in early June. It costs nothing, prevents more mildew than any spray, and takes 2 minutes with a pair of pruners. Baking soda spray before the mildew appears on a 7 to 10-day schedule starting late June. Milk spray after it appears in morning sunlight every 5 to 7 days. Morning application for everything, never evening. Water at the base of the plant, never overhead in the afternoon. Clean up every fallen infected leaf in October. Bag them, trash them, do not compost them. And if the same plant gets mildew every year despite all of this, stop fighting the genetics and swap the variety. Powdery mildew is not a death sentence for your garden. It is a ventilation problem wearing a fungal costume. Fix the air, fix the timing, fix the fall cleanup, and the problem shrinks from a garden-wide catastrophe to something you barely think about. You started this with a spray bottle in one hand and a phone in the other, wondering why the spray was not working. Now you know. The spray was never the answer. The pruners were. The morning timing was. The October raking was. The resistant cultivar was. The answer was never in the bottle. It was in the architecture of the garden itself, in the space between the stems, in the air moving through the canopy, in the choice of which plant to grow in the first place. What plant in your garden gets mildew every year? Tell me in the comments. And tell me whether thinning ever made a difference. If you tried it, that result is what everyone watching needs to hear. If you have not tried it, this is the year. Go to your phlox this week, count the stems, remove every third one at soil level. 2 minutes. That is the beginning. I will see you next week. There is more I want to show you.